Now, remittances, being the money sent home by migrant workers, has gained much attention recently as an increasingly important source of income to developing countries. Acceptance of flexible regulation, particularly in the channeling of mobile money remittances across the region, could help to improve Africa's economic performance. We're joined by Kim Dancey. She's with FNB's eWallet Solutions Strategic Legal Advisor. Thanks, Kim, for your time. Okay, we know that remittances are very, very important. A country like Kenya has, as a third most important forex component, remittances. So it's really quite important in Africa. How are remittances sent home? How can we make it easier?
As you said, remittances are a very important source of income. In some countries, the remittances, the money coming home from migrant workers actually is more than foreign investment.
Yeah.
The World Bank has done a report, and they're of the view if we can make remittances even slightly cheaper, you can actually improve the income of developing countries by 50 to 70%, just of individual households.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got various platforms through which money comes back home, but it seems, particularly in East Africa, which is where we're really seeing this proliferation of money coming through, is the money transfer mechanism. It seems to be working really well.
It does. In Kenya in particular, the domestic money transfer using M-Pesa works very, very well. And we're seeing, at FNB with our eWallet, we're seeing a lot of growth in South Africa from the domestic remittance. What we're particularly interested in, where regulation becomes very interesting, is the cross-border remittance aspect. In South Africa, we have some regulatory barriers to cross-border remittances, particularly at the lower income levels, and they have to do with regulation relating to money laundering that becomes closed for particular groups of people. For example, foreigners don't have access to this type of remittance without producing paper, so it becomes increasingly difficult.
Okay, so what is being sought? What would make it easier?
We have engaged with the Reserve Bank, and as you mentioned, Prem Gordon has said yesterday that they're looking to cut the red tape in terms of cross-border remittances. We're talking here particularly low-value remittances, so we must emphasize that. So one of the things we would like to see is, for example, that, as I said, anybody could remit money across the border, whereas currently, as I said, the regulatory limits to who can and how.
You talk about cumbersome regulation. Can you just talk us through it? Because there's so many ways in which people send their money home. Our domestic helper, for instance, she does it through the post office.
Yes.
Other people are doing it through mobile money services. Others are using agencies, you know, the Western Unions and the like.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there are a number of different channels. The informal market is the biggest market in the South African context. And again, predominantly because the price can be right. I mean, it is a price-sensitive area, and also because there's a lot of trust in that informal market. The formal market is, ironically, less trustworthy. The post office, for example, is a very lengthy process. It can take up to a week, if not longer, for the money to be transferred. So we're looking for something that's fast, transparent, convenient, and that's available to all. So you start talking mobile then. When you put those as the criteria, mobile becomes very interesting.
Okay, and what sort of regulation would then be needed? Because effectively there's the bank, which becomes the agency, and then there's the mobile company, which becomes the channel through which the money would go through. So you'd need regulation on two fronts, financial services type regulation and ICT regulation, and yet we need something to gel
come together. Depending on what model you're looking at. A bank-led mobile money model, which is what we have at eWallet, we don't rely particularly on what's happening on the mobile network operator. They're the carrier.
Right.
So obviously we have to integrate to them, and there's a relationship issue, but from a regulatory perspective, not that much of an issue. Where we have a mobile network operator-led model, that becomes a little more complicated.
Where are the routes most popular? And just give us a sense of how it works best, the best practice where we're seeing in Africa.
The obvious route is Zimbabwe. From South Africa, that's the obvious route. A report was done in 2010 where they reckon between 9 and 12 billion rand is crossing our South African borders annually. So it's a big market. And more than likely half of that is to Zimbabwe. The other channels that then become Mozambique, Lesotho and Malawi are the channels. Yeah, Mozambique, Lesotho and Malawi.
Okay, so we are now talking about the need to sort out the regulation to make it easier, and the Minister of Finance has added his voice to it. What now needs to happen?
To give you an example, you want anyone to be able to either act, let's talk the mobile, because we're talking mobile money and it's cool and it's interesting. On their phone, to be able to say, I want to remit money, where to, and they put in a cell phone number. The cell phone number will indicate exactly what country they're going to. So we already have that information. If they're using the banking channel, and even if they're using a mobile network channel, we already know who the person is. So that information has already been captured. The amount, and we need to find a way for regulatory purposes to say who the recipient is. But once we put in that information, that should be it.
Okay, so, I mean, we're talking here regulatory barriers, and we're talking about taking money back home. What would the responsibility of the sender be, and what would the responsibility of the receiver be to ensure that you are avoiding some of these legal pitfalls, for instance?
Okay. The first thing would be that in terms of money laundering requirements, we have to know who you are. So, but knowing who you are doesn't mean we need to know your address or where you live or have all this proof that's required in opening a bank account. So simplify that aspect already. Who are you, and can we link you to an ID number or a passport number? That's it. Then once we're going into, in the remittance space, we talk about the first mile challenge, then the middle mile challenge, and that's when we're doing currency conversion. So there's an element of looking at the middle mile challenge too. And the last mile challenge is when it gets to the other side. How does that person, the recipient, then access the money? So that becomes another point of that has to be looked at and made sure that there aren't any regulatory barriers to that happening on the recipient side.
Okay, we're talking about eWallet solutions. That's where you come from.
That's right.
What sort of solutions would you be offering?
On the mobile channel, online, and hopefully in the future on an ATM channel, simply to be able to access these channels and put in your information and be able to transfer the money without any further issues and difficulty and proving every single time income or showing who you are. It's to make it simpler. It's to make sure that everybody can send the money, whether you're a South African resident or a foreign national.